Rian had always felt like an ordinary person, someone who should be working in a quiet office on Earth, not walking through the shining gates of a place that looked like a dream from another world. Yet here he was, standing before the Grand Zitherian Palace, the center of peace meetings between many planets. The palace walls rose high like silver mountains, glowing softly as if lit from inside. Strange symbols ran across the walls, shifting colors like gentle waves. Even the floor beneath his feet felt alive, sending faint warm pulses upward with every step he took. He paused at the entrance, holding his small translator device tightly. He could hear dozens of languages being spoken in the distance, some like musical notes, some like soft humming, and some like whispers carried by wind. He understood most of them, thanks to his training, but the mixture still made his head spin a little. He had always worked in small labs or quiet meeting rooms back on Earth, never in places filled with hundreds of alien delegates. Everything here felt too big, too bright, and too important for someone like him. Rian had been chosen not because he was famous or powerful, but because he had something unusual. He stayed calm around new species. He did not panic when he saw creatures with shimmering wings, floating limbs, or glowing eyes. Instead, he felt curious. That quiet curiosity made him good at understanding behaviors and gestures that others found strange. His coworkers often joked that he had the patience of a planet-sized rock. He was unsure if that was a compliment, but he accepted it. As he entered the main hall, he almost stopped walking. The inside of the palace was even more breathtaking. Tall crystal columns rose toward a ceiling that looked like a moving sky filled with slow drifting lights. Soft music played from unseen instruments, and flowing cloth banners hung like long rivers of color. Delegates from many worlds stood in groups, talking in gentle tones. Some were tall and elegant like living statues, others were small and bright like moving lanterns. A few floated rather than walked, leaving glowing trails behind them. Rian kept to the side, enough to observe but not disturb anyone. He was always careful not to stand too close to someone from a species he didn't yet understand. Some cultures found closeness comforting, while others found it rude. His job required respect more than anything else. He touched the small metal badge clipped to his jacket, his official permission to act as an observer and translator. He still couldn't believe he had been chosen. Many talented translators on Earth could have taken this role, but the organizers had wanted someone who would remain steady no matter what happened. That had led to his name appearing on the assignment list. Before coming here, he had been warned about one thing more than anything else. The Queen of Zith. She was a respected ruler, known across many worlds for her calm and wise leadership. Her presence commanded attention, and her people admired her as the heart of their empire. But everyone also whispered that she protected her child with great care. The royal hatchling was not just another childless Therian. Young were rare, important, and believed to carry the future of their species. No outsider was allowed to get close without strict permission. That information alone made Rian nervous. He didn't want to accidentally break any important rule. He had been told to stay silent near the throne and only step forward if asked to help with communication. That was all. Nothing more. While he waited, he watched small groups of palace workers gently arranging the hall. They moved silently but gracefully, like dancers trained to work without sound. Some placed cups of warm drinks on floating trays, which drifted smoothly between the guests. Others checked the glowing patterns on the pillars, making sure they were steady and harmonious. Everything in the palace seemed to follow a soft rhythm, as though the building breathed with the people inside it. Rian felt a soft tap on his shoulder and turned to find a palace attendant standing behind him. The attendant's eyes were large and calm, their voice gentle when they spoke. "You must be the human translator," the attendant said in smooth Galaxy Standard speech. "Please stay near this area. When the Queen arrives, all movement must remain orderly." Rian nodded politely. "Of course. I will stay exactly where you instruct." The attendant smiled warmly, a gesture that eased some of his nerves. "Do not worry. Many feel overwhelmed during their first visit. The palace welcomes peaceful guests." The reassurance helped more than he expected. He let out a slow breath and kept observing the hall. As the minutes passed, the crowd grew larger. More delegates arrived, each in unique clothing and colors. Some wore flowing robes with tiny lights woven into the fabric. Others wore armor-like attire covered with beautiful patterns. A few appeared so delicate that they seemed to be made of threads of light rather than solid shape. The air filled with a gentle mix of scents, flowers, fresh rain, and unfamiliar spice-like fragrances, but none were unpleasant. Instead, the combination made the hall feel like a colorful marketplace from a dream. Rian was careful to keep his expression neutral. He didn't want anyone to think that seeing so many new faces made him anxious. Still, inside he felt both excited and overwhelmed. The magnitude of the atmosphere reminded him that he was part of something greater than anything he had experienced before. Then came the whispers. "They say the Queen is bringing the hatchling today." "Yes, for the first time. It is symbolic." "I heard the child is curious, but still shy around unfamiliar faces." Rian listened quietly. The idea of seeing a Zitherian hatchling was surprising. Hatchlings were rarely shown in public. Their early years were sacred, and only the royal circle usually cared for them. Bringing the hatchling to a gathering like this meant the queen trusted the summit greatly. Yet with trust came careful attention. More guards appeared along the walls, standing tall and still. Their presence was not threatening. Instead, they felt like calm protectors, watching over the flow of the gathering. Rian knew he had to be even more cautious now. He made sure his stance was polite and non-threatening. His hands kept visible and relaxed. A sudden soft vibration spread across the hall, a signal that the queen's arrival was close. The lights shifted to a calmer glow, and the gentle music paused. Delegates moved slightly back to create a welcoming path. Everyone lowered their voices or fell silent entirely. Rian stood at the far left of the throne area, where he had been told to remain. He pressed his palms together lightly to stop his fingers from fidgeting. His heart beat a little faster than usual. Soft footsteps echoed, followed by a smooth hum that filled the hall with a peaceful warmth. The queen's escort was approaching. Rian saw them first. Tall figures wearing long silver robes, moving with a graceful unity. After them came the queen herself, elegant and calm, with gentle shimmering patterns across her skin that shifted like soft starlight. Behind her, surrounded by a small protective circle of trusted attendants, was the hatchling. Rian felt a sense of awe. The young creature was small, about the size of a human toddler, but its eyes were bright and curious, glowing softly like two warm lanterns. Its skin held delicate pastel shades that changed slightly depending on how it moved. It looked peaceful yet full of quiet wonder as it glanced around the hall, taking in the new sights. Many delegates lowered their heads respectfully. Some smiled with affection. It was rare for anyone to see the royal child, and even rarer for the hatchling to attend a diplomatic event. Rian stayed perfectly still, reminding himself not to draw any unwanted attention. He watched quietly as the queen took her place at the throne, her expression calm and welcoming. The palace workers resumed their gentle movements, and the hall filled once more with soft conversation. But even as the ceremony began, Rian couldn't shake a small thought in the back of his mind. He had a feeling, just a tiny one, that this day would not stay quiet for long. And deep inside the glowing hall, beneath all the beauty and calm, something small was already beginning to stir. Rian stood quietly at the edge of the grand hall, doing everything he could to remain unnoticed while still performing his duty. The ceremony had only just begun, but already the atmosphere felt different from what he had expected. There was a gentle excitement in the air, the kind that came from seeing something rare. Delegates kept stealing glances toward the small royal hatchling beside the queen. The young creature sat calmly at first, its soft colors glowing like morning light through a misty window. Rian found himself watching the hatchling more than he intended, not out of rudeness, but out of pure fascination. The child moved with a gentle grace, swaying its small head as though it was listening to music no one else could hear. Sometimes its tiny fingers curled and uncurled, catching faint sparks of light drifting through the hall. Rian had read about Zitharian young, how they were sensitive to the emotions around them. He wondered what the hatchling must be feeling with so many new faces all gathered in one place. The queen spoke to her attendants in soft tones, checking that the hatchling was comfortable. She moved with a calm presence, but Rian noticed something else too. Her attention was split. She wanted her child to grow familiar with other worlds and people, yet she clearly understood that this environment could overwhelm the little one. The queen's love showed in every small gesture. The ceremony continued with peaceful greetings between delegates. Each representative stepped forward one by one, offering respectful gifts or short welcoming speeches. Some presented glowing crystals containing messages from distant planets. Others brought symbolic items, like woven cloths or delicate sculptures shaped with their cultural meanings. Rian translated a few of the speeches quietly when needed, doing his best to keep his voice calm and clear. When he wasn't speaking, he simply listened, observing everything with a gentle curiosity. But he wasn't the only one observing. The hatchling's eyes wandered often. Sometimes they settled on a bright robe, sometimes on a floating tray, and sometimes on the sparkling lights drifting from the ceiling. The child seemed calm at first, till the room grew more crowded. More footsteps, more voices, more bright colors, more unfamiliar faces. And then Rian saw it, a slight trembling in the hatchling's hands. At first he thought he was imagining it, but no, there was a gentle shake. The hatchling tucked its small arms close to its chest and leaned closer to one of the attendants. It wasn't fearful exactly, but it was clearly becoming overwhelmed. Rian quietly noted the change, though he knew it wasn't his place to act unless someone asked. The queen noticed too, giving the hatchling a warm, soothing hum, a sound so soft that only those near the throne could hear it. For a while, it helped, but as more delegates approached, the hatchling's glow dimmed slightly, a sign of unease. Rian couldn't help feeling a little worried, not out of duty, but out of simple human empathy. He knew what it felt like to be overwhelmed in a new environment. He felt it now too, though he hid it well. Maybe that was why he felt a small sense of understanding toward the young creature. Then came an unexpected shift. A group of new delegates entered late, wearing tall headpieces and long decorative sleeves that made soft flapping sounds as they walked. The sound echoed more loudly than anything else in the hall. The hatchling jumped slightly at the noise, turning sharply to look. Its eyes widened, Its soft colors flickered. Rian's heart tightened, though he didn't move. He wasn't the only one who noticed. The queen signaled for the music to soften, hoping the calming atmosphere would help the child relax. But the hall had already grown to full, the movement to constant. The hatchling shuffled backward, inching away from the center of attention. The attendants whispered to each other, unsure whether they should move the child or let it stay near the queen. They didn't want to interrupt the ceremony, but they also didn't want the hatchling to grow distressed. Then, in a moment so quiet that only a few saw it, the hatchling slipped past one attendant's leg and took a small step away from the throne. The movement was tiny, but it started everything. One attendant reached forward gently, trying to guide the child back. But the hatchling, already overwhelmed by the growing noise and number of faces, panicked just a little and scurried away faster than expected. It wasn't a run, more like a quick shuffle, but to the attendants, it felt like a gust of wind. They stood frozen for a second, surprised that the young royal had moved away on its own. Rian watched the scene in slow motion. The hatchling looked left. It looked right. Its tiny glow flickered faster. Then, without warning, it slipped into a small crowd of tall delegates and disappeared between them. Gasps filled the hall. The music stopped instantly. All delegates turned toward the throne in shock. The queen stood up a little straighter, her calm expression tightening as she scanned the room. Her attendants looked around urgently, trying to find the soft glow of the hatchling, but the child was nowhere to be seen. Rian felt his heart jump. He wasn't supposed to move from his spot, but instinct made him step forward half an inch before stopping himself. He didn't know what he could do, but he couldn't ignore the worry rising in his chest. The palace guards moved quickly but remained gentle in their actions. They didn't want to frighten the guests. They simply formed a protective circle, narrowing the space so the hatchling couldn't get too far. The palace doors closed quietly behind invisible shields to prevent the child from wandering outside. Rian's eyes scanned the hall, not with panic, but with careful attention. He remembered reading about Zetherian hatchlings. They often hid in quiet corners when overwhelmed. They didn't choose high places or loud spaces. They chose places where the lights were soft and movements were gentle. He listened closely. There were voices everywhere, whispers, questions, confused murmurs, but beneath all of them, he heard something faint. A small tapping sound, not loud enough for most people to notice, but steady, almost like tiny fingers brushing against a surface. Rian turned his head slightly. There it was again, soft tapping, then a quick scraping sound, like someone shifting their tiny feet. He followed the sound with his eyes, toward the left corridor, an area few people were standing near. It was dimmer than the rest of the hall, lit only by soft blue crystals, a place quiet enough for a frightened hatchling. The attendants moved in the opposite direction, searching near the right side of the throne. Rian hesitated. Should he speak? Should he stay silent? His assignment was simple: observe, unless asked. But the tapping came again, almost like a tiny call for help. The queen stepped forward, concern showing in the soft dim of her glowing patterns. She instructed her attendants to check the far corners of the hall. Still, they did not check the corridor where Rian heard the noise. He swallowed hard. Finally, he lifted a hand slightly to signal an attendant, but before he could speak, the sound near the corridor changed. It became sharper, faster. Rian felt his heart tighten again. He couldn't ignore it. Taking a careful step, he moved closer to the corridor's edge. He didn't enter it, but he leaned just enough to see the dim shape of something small, something glowing faintly tucked behind a pillar. His breath caught. There it was. The hatchling, curled slightly, trembling softly, glowing like a frightened firefly. Rian froze. He didn't want to alarm it. He didn't want to draw attention too quickly. He stood still and spoke softly, not in words but in gentle breaths, hoping the little one would sense his calmness. The hatchling lifted its head slowly. Its glowing eyes met Rian's, and in that moment, something changed in the air. It blinked once, studying him, as though weighing something important, something instinctive. Then the soft sound of footsteps grew louder behind Rian, as guards approached from the other side. Before anyone else reached the corridor, the hatchling made a sudden decision. It uncurled, it stood, and then, with quiet, quick steps, it ran straight toward Rian. Rian took only one breath before the small creature reached him, pressed itself behind his leg, and held tightly to his coat fabric, trembling but trusting. The entire palace seemed to stop breathing. Delegates stared. Attendants froze. Even the queen paused in mid-step, her eyes widening gently in astonishment. No one in the hall could believe what they were seeing. The royal hatchling, who had never chosen any outsider, was hiding behind a simple human translator. Behind him, Rian stood completely still, afraid that even the slightest movement might frighten the small creature holding on to him. He could feel the light pressure of the hatchling's tiny fingers gripping the back of his coat. Its trembling body pressed against his leg as though he were the only safe place in the entire palace. He did not know why the royal child had chosen him, but he knew one thing. If he moved too quickly, the frightened hatchling might panic even more. All eyes in the hall had already turned toward him. The bright colors, shining decorations, and soft music that had filled the room moments earlier now felt far away. Every corner of the hall had gone quiet, as if time itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Delegates whispered among themselves in gentle confusion. Why the human? How did he reach the child? What does this mean? Rian wanted to explain that he had not done anything at all, that the hatchling had simply chosen him on its own, but he could not speak. His voice felt stuck in his throat. Instead, he stood calmly, breathing slowly, hoping the little one would sense his steady heartbeat and relax. The palace guards approached very carefully. Their movements were soft and slow, like shadows sliding across the floor. They didn't want to scare the child further. One of them stepped closer and lowered himself slightly to look at the hatchling. But the moment the guard reached out a gentle hand, the hatchling gave a small sound, not loud, but full of fear. It pressed itself tighter against Rian, hiding completely behind him. The glow of its skin flickered, showing clearly that it did not want the guard to come closer. The guard stopped immediately. Rian swallowed, unsure what to do next. He had been trained in languages, not in caring for royal children from another world. He had no idea how to comfort his Etherian hatchling. He only knew how to stay calm, so he continued to breathe softly, letting the hatchling hold on to him for as long as it needed. Then something unexpected happened. The hatchling peeked out from behind his coat, only a tiny bit, just enough for its glowing eyes to meet Rian's face again. It looked at him as if searching for reassurance. Rian gave a soft, warm smile, not too wide, not too sudden, just gentle enough to say, "It's okay, you're safe." The hatchling relaxed slightly, its trembling slowing little by little. Behind them, the queen began to walk forward. Her steps were graceful but filled with emotion. The flowing patterns on her skin glowed softly, shifting through gentle colors that reflected her concern. The hall parted silently for her, every delegate bowing their head as she passed. Her presence commanded respect, but there was no harshness in her movements, only deep maternal worry. But as the queen came closer, the hatchling gave a tiny whimper and pressed itself fully behind Rian again. Rian's eyes widened. He did not understand why the child would hide even from its own mother. But then he realized, it wasn't fear of the queen, it was the fear of being watched by so many new faces, bright lights, and unfamiliar sounds. Rian happened to be the only one standing in a quiet, shadowed spot. The hatchling wanted calm, and it sensed it from him. The queen paused, gently raising a hand toward her child. But she did not try to take the hatchling from Rian. Instead, she studied the sight with thoughtful eyes. She looked at Rian not with anger, not with suspicion, but with deep curiosity. The hall remained silent. One of the queen's attendants cleared his throat softly. "Your Majesty, shall we guide the hatchling back to your side?" The queen lifted her hand slightly, signaling him to stop. Her gaze never left Rian. "Not yet," she said softly. "Let us see." Her voice carried through the hall, warm and calm. Rian felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. He wanted to bow, but he was afraid to move too much while the hatchling clung to him. He felt caught between duty and the gentle creature that seemed to trust him completely. He remained still, letting the queen approach at her own pace. She walked closer, her presence comforting rather than intimidating. When she reached only a few steps away, she knelt down, something no one in the hall expected. A ruler of one of the greatest empires in the galaxy was kneeling, not to Rian but to her child. "Little one," she said in her soft humming language, "you are safe. It is all right." The hatchling listened, peeking out slightly again. Its glow brightened by a small degree, showing that it recognized her voice. But instead of running to her, it stayed behind Rian, gripping the back of his coat gently. Rian whispered softly, unsure if the hatchling could understand his words, but trying anyway. "Your mother is here. You're safe." The hatchling looked up at him again. Its eyes shone with trust, but also with a childlike uncertainty. It seemed torn, wanting to go to the queen, but too overwhelmed to step forward. The queen noticed this and nodded thoughtfully. Then she spoke to Rian in gentle, respectful tones. "You are calm? The child feels it from you." Rian's breath caught in his throat. He bowed his head slightly. "Your Majesty, I did not mean to. You did nothing wrong," she said kindly. The hall was silent enough to hear every word. "The young of my people are very sensitive. They sense emotions more clearly than words. This one, my child, feels your quietness. Your heart is steady. That is why it chose you." Rian felt warmth rise in his chest, not pride, just a deep sense of responsibility. Around them, the delegates whispered again, but this time with wonder. The queen extended her hand once more, slower this time, shining with soft light. The hatchling looked at her, then back at her again. It wanted to move but didn't dare leave the safety it felt. So Rian did the only thing he could think of. He slowly crouched down, not too quickly, not too close. Just enough so that the hatchling could see both his face and the queen clearly. He whispered gently, "It's all right. She's here. You can go if you want." The hatchling finally stepped out from behind him, but only halfway, still holding onto the edge of his coat. The queen's expression softened even more as she saw this. The palace attendants watched with wide eyes, unsure if they should help or stay back. The guards kept their distance, moving only if needed. Rian kept his breathing calm and steady so the hatchling would remain peaceful. The child took a few tiny steps toward its mother but kept glancing back at Rian every few seconds. It was clear now, the hatchling was not running from the queen. It simply felt safer near Rian than in the overwhelming noise of the hall. The queen finally reached out and touched the hatchling gently. The soft glow of her touch soothed the child, and its trembling faded completely. But even as it settled beside her, the small creature still kept one hand resting lightly on Rian's sleeve. A sign of trust, a sign of connection, something precious and entirely unexpected. The queen looked at Rian with a thoughtful expression. It seems my child has chosen you. Rian blinked slowly, stunned. Chosen me? Yes, the queen replied softly, and such choices should never be ignored. Around them, the hall remained silent, filled with stunned faces. No one had ever seen anything like this before, and Rian understood in that moment that nothing about his life would ever be the same again. Rian could feel every eye in the hall on him, and for a moment, he wished the floor would open up and let him sink inside. Yet, despite the shock of the delegates, he stayed as calm as he could. The royal hatchling clung gently to his coat, tiny fingers soft but firm, as if saying silently, I trust you. Rian had never felt so responsible in his life. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a life from another world, a life entrusted to him without warning or explanation. The queen stepped closer, her movements smooth and deliberate. Her glowing skin shifted colors in a pattern Rian hadn't seen before, deep blues and soft silvers mingling with gentle gold. Her eyes, large and luminous, fixed on the hatchling, and then on him. There was no anger in them, no judgment, only observation and curiosity. He had read that Zetherian leaders were calm and wise, but seeing it firsthand made him feel like he was standing before a force of nature that could judge everything with a single glance and yet choose to show patience instead. Do you understand, she asked, her voice low and melodic, that your presence is unusual? Rian nodded slowly, unsure if he should speak. Yes, Your Majesty. I did not mean to intrude. I only tried to stay calm so the hatchling could feel safe. Her glow softened into warm, gentle tones. And it has felt that. That is why it chose you. Our young can sense more than words, more than appearances. It senses hearts. Rian swallowed hard. His heart raced, not with fear but with the weight of the moment. He was a human, a translator from a small planet called Earth. And now the future of a royal child from a powerful alien empire had, in a way, connected itself to him. Delegates in the hall murmured among themselves. Some whispered words of amazement. Others looked uncertain, unsure how to react to such an unprecedented event. The guards shifted slightly, their training telling them to act, but their instincts telling them to wait. The queen had not commanded them, and Rian realized that no one wanted to act until she gave a signal. The hatchling took a tiny step forward, still holding onto Rian's sleeve. Its glow flickered with uncertainty, yet there was trust in its movements. It was almost as if it were saying, I know you will not let them harm me. The queen knelt down slowly, her tall form folding with grace. Bringing her glowing eyes level with the child's little one, she said softly, You are safe now. You may go, if you wish. The hatchling looked at her, then at Rian, then back at her again. It wanted to move toward her but could not release the security it had found in a stranger's presence. Rian noticed something remarkable. In its gaze, he saw not fear but careful decision. Even at this young age, the hatchling had a sense of discernment, weighing comfort and safety. Do you see? The queen said, turning her eyes briefly to Rian. This is why your calmness matters. You did not attempt to command it. You did not frighten it. You simply were present. Rian nodded, not trusting his voice. His hands remained still, even as he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, each second stretching into eternity. He could feel the entire hall watching, yet he focused only on the hatchling, allowing himself to become a still point in the chaos of color, light, and movement. Slowly, the hatchling released Rian's coat but only partially, moving halfway toward the queen. The small creature's glow became warmer, softening from the trembling light it had shown moments before. The queen extended her hand, and the hatchling hesitated, its tiny limbs almost shaking as it took the final step toward its mother. Then, just as it reached her, the hatchling paused, one hand lifted, brushing lightly against Rian's sleeve once more. A gesture of trust and acknowledgement. Gasps echoed softly throughout the hall. Delegates and attendants alike whispered in awe. Many had never witnessed a royal hatchling behave in such a way, let alone select an outsider as a source of comfort. The queen smiled, a subtle shift in her expression that radiated calm authority. It seems, Rian, she said, her voice gentle but carrying to the edges of the hall, that you have been chosen not by me, but by my child. And such choices must always be respected. Rian felt a shiver of disbelief. Chosen by the hatchling? He asked, barely above a whisper. Yes, she replied. The young of my people are not easily swayed. They do not choose lightly. To gain its trust is a rare honor, and it speaks of the strength within you. He shook his head slightly, unsure how to respond. He had never sought recognition, never imagined that a child from another world could feel trust for him, let alone in such a public moment. Yet here it was, undeniable and undeniable. The hatchling's tiny hand still rested lightly on his sleeve, a silent affirmation that this was real. The queen continued, her voice softening further. From this moment, you will hold a role that few outsiders ever achieve. You will be recognized as a guardian not of my child alone, but of the trust it has extended to you. Your calmness, your patience, your heart. These are the tools you carry, far more than words or training. Rian felt his mind reel. A guardian. For a royal hatchling, a human among the Zitharian, entrusted with the safety of a child whose very presence represented the future of an empire. The weight of it was almost unbearable, yet he felt a strange sense of clarity. This was not about power or prestige. It was about trust, compassion, presence. The hatchling, sensing the change in the air, brightened slightly, the soft glow of its skin reflecting relief and comfort. Its tiny body leaned slightly toward Rian again, acknowledging that he had not faltered. Even in the midst of so many eyes and so much ceremony, he had remained steady. That steadiness had created a bond, fragile but undeniable, between a human and a child of another world. The queen looked around the hall, her glowing eyes meeting those of the assembled delegates. "Let all witnesses see this," she said, her tone both commanding and kind, "and understand that trust can exist across worlds. It is not given lightly. It is felt." Delegates bowed subtly, many of them still whispering, some recording the moment in memory or devices, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Rian remained crouched slightly, still keeping his presence calm and unobtrusive. He felt the hatchling's tiny hand on him once more, and he realized that no words could fully explain the connection they now shared. It was a language beyond speech, beyond diplomacy. It was trust manifested in a fragile but powerful bond. The queen finally stood, lifting the hatchling gently into her arms. The young one leaned briefly against Rian before nestling fully into the comfort of its mother. Rian's heart swelled with emotion, but he did not move to step back or celebrate. He simply stayed still, aware that the quiet moment he had created had changed the course of his life. "You have done well," the queen said, turning her luminous eyes to him again. "Not by intent, but by being. Remember this. Presence, steadiness, and compassion are sometimes the most powerful actions of all." Rian nodded slowly, feeling a deep sense of awe. He had been a quiet observer, and yet his quiet had made a difference. In that moment, he understood something profound. Even a single human, far from home, could touch the life of another world not with words, but with heart. The hall began to hum softly again as the attendants and guards relaxed. Delegates resumed their positions, though whispers of astonishment continued. No one could ignore what had happened. Even the most seasoned diplomats knew they had witnessed an extraordinary bond form in the most unlikely of circumstances. The queen carried her child back toward the throne, the hatchling's small hand brushing lightly against her glowing robe, still shimmering with curiosity and trust. Rian followed at a respectful distance, knowing that his role was now forever changed. The palace no longer felt like a place he had merely visited. It had become a world he was now connected to in ways he could not have imagined. And as he walked, still careful not to draw too much attention, Rian realized something else. He had been given a responsibility that went far beyond translation or observation. He was now a guardian of trust, a bridge between worlds, and the protector of a bond that few could ever understand. It was a weight and an honor he would carry quietly, with calmness, patience, and heart, knowing that sometimes the smallest gestures like standing still and letting a frightened child find comfort could change everything. The moment passed, yet it lingered. Delegates whispered in awe. The queen's attendants smiled gently, and somewhere in the palace, a small hatchling glowed softly, knowing that it had found something extraordinary in a human from another world. Rian knew his life had been forever altered. He could never go back to being just an ordinary translator. Not after this. Not after being chosen. The hall, filled with color, light, and the quiet hum of interplanetary diplomacy, had witnessed something that would be remembered for generations. The day a royal hatchling reached out to a human and found calm, safety, and trust in the most unlikely of companions. And Rian would never forget it. Rian walked slowly behind the queen and her hatchling, careful to remain at a respectful distance. Though the hall had returned to its normal rhythm of soft conversations and graceful movements, he could still feel the quiet weight of attention on him. Every delegate and attendant seemed to understand that something extraordinary had occurred, though none dared to speak aloud. He felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. The realization had begun to sink in. He was no longer just an observer. Somehow, he had become a part of the palace, a part of this world in a way he had never imagined. The hatchling, nestled safely in the queen's arms, glanced up at him from time to time, small luminous eyes glowing softly. Rian noticed that even though the child was back with its mother, it still seemed to acknowledge him with trust, as if silently saying, "You are my friend. You are safe." That small gesture, so subtle, made his heart swell with a mix of pride and humility. He understood now that he had become more than a translator. He had become a guardian in ways he could not yet fully comprehend. The queen moved to a private chamber at the far end of the palace. The walls were lined with softly glowing crystals, and the light they cast shimmered in gentle waves across the polished floors. The hatchling squirmed slightly, curious about the new space, and the queen placed it carefully on a low platform where it could look around safely. She then turned her attention back to Rian. "Come," she said softly. "It is time we speak in private." Rian hesitated for a moment. He was a human from Earth, used to quiet offices and small meetings, not private conversations with rulers of galactic empires. but he nodded and followed, keeping his movements calm and steady, aware that any sudden motion might startle the hatchling. Once they were seated across from each other, the queen studied him carefully. "Rian," she began, "your calmness and presence have done more than you realize. The child's choice was not random. It saw something in you that it trusts." Rian swallowed. "Your Majesty, I don't know why it chose me. I only stayed still. I didn't know what else to do." The queen smiled gently. Her glowing skin shifted into warm golds and soft silvers. "Sometimes the simplest actions hold the greatest power. Your presence gave the hatchling stability in a moment of fear. That is rare. That is why you have been chosen as its guardian, not in a controlling sense, but as a guide, someone it knows it can trust." Rian felt his chest tighten. A guide? A guardian? He had never imagined that his life could take such a path. On Earth, he had been an ordinary translator, quietly assisting in understanding words and gestures. Now, he was entrusted with the care and trust of a creature whose very existence carried the weight of an entire empire's future. The queen continued, "You will remain close to us during your stay. The child will need you. Its trust is fragile, but it is precious. You must protect it, guide it gently, and maintain calm in all things. The palace is full of beauty and wonder, but also many new experiences that could overwhelm it. Your role is to be the still point in its world." Rian nodded, feeling both the enormity and the clarity of the responsibility. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will do everything I can." The queen's eyes softened. "I believe you will. And know this, trust like this is never given lightly. It is a bond. Respect it, nurture it, and you will find that the child teaches you as much as you guide it." For the next several days, Rian adjusted to a life he had never imagined. Each morning, he was awakened not by the quiet hum of his apartment on Earth, but by the gentle glow and soft movements of the hatchling. The child would peek at him from its bed, its small, glowing eyes blinking curiously, and Rian would greet it with quiet words and calm gestures. Slowly, the hatchling began to respond to him more openly, exploring nearby areas with him always nearby, trusting that he would remain steady and watchful. He noticed something remarkable. The hatchling's curiosity seemed boundless. It asked questions in its own way, teeny gestures, soft hums, and gentle touches. Rian learned to understand each subtle sign, guiding the young creature without fear or interruption. Even the queen observed with interest, often nodding slightly as she saw how naturally the bond between human and hatchling was growing. The palace itself became a place of learning for Rian. He wandered through halls of shifting light, rooms filled with softly glowing plants, and corridors that hummed with gentle energy. Everywhere he went, the hatchling followed him or observed from a safe distance. Learning from his movements and voice, slowly, Rian began to understand not only the child's trust, but the palace's rhythms: when to speak, when to remain silent, how to navigate both the beauty and the unpredictability of life there. As days passed, the delegates began to notice the unusual partnership. During smaller gatherings, the hatchling would approach Rian first, glancing at the queen before exploring the room. It was as if the child was saying silently to the others, "He is safe, he is steady, he is trusted." The humans and aliens alike were amazed. Some tried to offer guidance, but the hatchling ignored them. Only Rian's presence mattered. The queen began to include him more actively in events, though always carefully. He was no longer just a translator or observer, he became a bridge between worlds. During formal discussions, he helped interpret subtle cues between delegates and the hatchling, ensuring that the child's reactions were understood without frightening it. Rian realized that trust could be a powerful force in diplomacy. A small gesture, a calm presence, could ease tension more than words or formal agreements. One evening, after a long day of meetings, the queen invited Rian to walk with her and the hatchling through the palace gardens. The gardens were unlike anything he had seen on Earth. Bioluminescent flowers floated gently in the air. Streams shimmered with soft light, and the scent of unknown blooms filled the air with a calming fragrance. The hatchling darted ahead, then paused, glancing back at Rian, as if saying, "Come, I will show you." The queen watched silently, her luminous patterns softening. "See how it grows confident in your presence," she said. "It learns to explore, to trust, because it knows you will not fail it. That is the power of a guardian. You are not just protecting it, is teaching you as well." Rian smiled faintly, realizing she was right. The hatchling's trust had changed him too. He was learning patience, awareness, and subtle ways of communication beyond words. It was a lesson in understanding another being, and finding empathy and calmness even in the most overwhelming situations. By the end of the week, the queen held a small ceremony in the hall. She introduced Rian formally, acknowledging his role in caring for the hatchling and bridging the trust between human and Zetharian life. Delegates applauded softly, many bowing in respect. Rian's heart swelled, not with pride but with gratitude for the opportunity. The hatchling glowed brightly, circling Rian before returning to the queen's arms. A silent sign of approval that the audience could clearly see. From that day on, Rian's life was never the same. He continued his work as a translator, yes, but his presence became much more than that. He was the calm point for a royal hatchling navigating a palace full of wonders and potential dangers. He was a bridge between species, a teacher and learner in one. And most importantly, he was trusted. The palace, the hatchling, and the queen became his new world, a world where a quiet presence, steady heart, and compassion mattered more than anything else. And every night, when the hallways grew silent and the soft lights of the palace shimmered gently, Rian would find himself near the hatchling, feeling a deep, unspoken connection. He understood that this bond would shape not only his life but also the life of the young royal child. The trust between them would last, growing stronger with each day, and together, they would navigate a world full of wonders, challenges, and endless possibilities. For Rian, being chosen was more than an honorette, was a responsibility, a connection, and a lesson that sometimes the smallest gestures of calm and care could create bonds that crossed worlds and changed lives forever. And in the glowing halls of the Zetharian palace, Rian and the hatchling shared a quiet understanding that needed no words. They had found each other, and together, they would face whatever the future held.